Yes, the link has been generated and we have shared it with the participants. Rekha ma'am,
Yes.
still a few minutes are left.
All the best.
Sudhakar sir, kindly give us few minutes time.
Yeah.
Can we start, Rekha ma'am? Asha ma'am, can we start?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Asha ma'am. Thank you, Rekha ma'am. So I begin this today's webinar. Good afternoon, everyone present here. We are here today for the one-day national level webinar on topic 75 years of independence, achievements, challenges, and roadmap ahead. The 75th year of independence uh, will be celebrated in year 2023, 2023. The Independence Day celebration reflects the pride of our ancient India, the glory of modern India. Freedom celebration is a reflection of the freedom struggle, of all the sacrifices, a tribute to our soldiers, our martyrs, our great nation, and also a resolve, a promise to build an India a strong, powerful, and prosperous nation. Today, our country is doing things that could not be imagined until a few years ago. Today, we can proudly say that during post independence, we have achieved a lot. We are a nation of 130 million people, and each and every person's contribution is significant for the growth of our great nation, our beloved India. We will celebrate our 75th year of independence in year 2023 with the title given by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi as Azadi Ke Amrut Mahotsav. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has given us 5 agendas for celebration: freedom struggle, ideas at 75, achievements at 75, actions at 75, and resolve at 75. Our Honorable Prime Minister further said that we have to move forward with these 5 agendas, and all this should incorporate ideas and feelings of 130 crore Indians. As per the direction received from Ministry of Information and Broadcasting that Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav would commence 75 weeks prior to the Independence Day 2022 and will extend up to Independence Day 2023. We are organizing this program because of this Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Now, Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav is celebrated the essence of energy of freedom, nectar of inspiration, nectar of new ideas, resolutions, and new reliance. So, in this connection, the NSS and IQAC committees of Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College has decided to conduct various activities to celebrate Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav festival with full of motivation and enthusiasm. Why we are celebrating this? inspire our young students, to make them understand, to help them understand the glory of India, our struggle, our challenges, achievements, and most importantly, how we go ahead, how to chart down the roadmap of future India. In this series, we are organizing our first program, the national level webinar to celebrate our freedom and of our free India. I, on behalf Dr. Ritu Bhatia, on behalf of IQSC and NSS committee of Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College, take immense pleasure to welcome each and everyone for today's webinar. Welcome you all. Now, moving ahead, I invite our principal ma'am, Dr. Asha Menon madam, to address and enlighten our participant. On behalf of NSS and IQSC committee, I heartily welcome our principal madam, Dr. Asha Menon madam. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Over to
Dr.
you.
Ritu Bhatia. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the national webinar on 75 years of independence, achievement, challenges, and roadmap for future, planned under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav Government of India program, organized by IQAC and NSS of S.P.N. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai. We are all aware that our great nation is now just a few months away from the 75th anniversary of Indian independence. Commemoration activities will be held in every state and union territory where India's glorious history, culture, technological development, and digital intervention will be showed. The idea behind the Mahotsav is to showcase accomplishments since 1947 so as to instill a sense of pride and to create a vision for India at 2047. I feel the event would be a befitting way of celebrating India at 75, considering its ancient and diverse heritage and culture, natural resources, and arts. The 75th Independence Day will be celebrated with the spirit of freedom struggle and reflect the feeling of sacrifice. According to our Prime Minister's vision, the 75th Independence Day will have a glimpse of the pride of the Sanathan India and the glow of modern India as well, while taking along the 130 crore countrymen with us. The public participation will be the basic spirit of this event. And therefore, this is the reason UGC has involved all the universities and colleges for the important event. To dwell more on the topic, 75 years of independence, achievement, challenges, and roadmap for future, I am truly delighted to welcome the speaker for today, Mr. Sudhakar Solamraj ji, who accepted our invitation with so much of grace. Thank you, sir, for being with us. I'm eagerly waiting to hear from you, sir. I would also like to welcome all the principals, vice principals, coordinators, and the participants for this webinar. We are happy to see such an overwhelming response from the participants. Wishing the webinar the very best, and I congratulate the IQAC team and the NSS of our college for organizing this webinar. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Ritu Bhatia for further proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Asha ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Asha Menon ma'am, for your speech. Now, moving ahead, I invite my colleague, Dr. Ved Prakash Dubey, to take charge of the further proceedings. Dr. Ved Prakash Dubey, over to you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद रितु मैडम। एक बेहतरीन वेबिनार जो कि राष्ट्रीय लेवल पे आयोजित किया गया है श्रीमती पीएन दोशी महिला महाविद्यालय के एक्यूएससी और एनएसएस कमेटी द्वारा, और ये मेरा सौभाग्य है कि आज के मुख्य वक्ता श्रीमान सुधाकर सोलमराज सर का स्वागत करना है। और इनके परिचय में हम आपको बताएं, इन्होंने तो परिचय देने के लिए स्पष्ट मना कर दिया था, कहा कि परिचय नहीं देना है, मेरा कोई कुछ, मेरा नाम ही बहुत है। लेकिन सर थोड़ी सी जानकारी हम लोगों से शेयर कर देते हैं कि 1983 मतलब लगभग 38 वर्ष से आप विल्सन महाविद्यालय में अध्यापन कर रहे हैं। बहुमुखी प्रतिभा संपन्न सुधाकर सर प्रकृति से बहुत प्रेम करते हैं और इसीलिए आप नेचर क्लब से जुड़े हुए हैं। और सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि आज आपके अनुभवों का जो निचोड़ है इस सेमिनार में राष्ट्रीय स्तर पे सब जानेंगे और समझेंगे। और बहुत कुछ आप आज लेकर के आए होंगे हमें देने के लिए। हम सब बहुत बेसब्री से सर वेट कर रहे हैं आपके वक्तव्य का। तो आज के इस नेशनल वेबिनार में श्रीमती पीएन दोषी महिला महाविद्यालय और के एक्यूएससी और एनएसएस कमेटी द्वारा आयोजित इस वेबिनार में आपका स्वागत है। और आज के वक्तव्य के लिए मैं आपको सादर आमंत्रित करता हूं सर। सुधाकर सर।
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Asha Menon, Dr. Ritu Bhatia, Dr. Ved Prakash. I'm very happy to be a part of this seminar, and the idea is to commemorate and celebrate a country. So I want all participants, especially students, I hope you have a pen and paper with you. If not, if you can even type it out. I have a few questions for you to think about. And also, I want to start with those questions, and then I will let you know how I'm going to go about it. How much time do I have?
Sir, 1 hour.
1 hour. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so I would like each, if all, especially students, young people can write down these questions. What are the first question? What are the 5 things you feel good about India? Those of us who are Indians, if you can answer this question, what are the 5 things? If you can specifically write down. I don't want any kind of general things. I may not have much time for a discussion, but at the end of the session, maybe if I have time, I will ask for some answers. But for our own, this process of 75 weeks where we are going to celebrate India, but it's also important for us to identify first, what are the 5 things you feel good about India? The second question is, what are the 3 things which you as an individual have, as an individual do to help build a sense of nation? So if you belong to a country, what are the 3 things you do on a regular basis? I want specific things which you can identify, which you do for the country. Okay, so therefore, that's one question. Now, the second question is important. As a teacher of political science, many, many years ago, I discovered that in Athens, ancient Greece, when a young man became 18 years, he had to take an oath. And the oath was that he would respect the rule of law, uphold the rule of law. He would also contribute to fulfilling the objectives of the state. And he also, if he could not leave the state better, he would not leave the state worse off. And this is something which I think is a commitment which if each one of us can make. So if you see, if you talk about our country, and many of us will claim that we love our country. So if you love our country, what is it that we do on a regular basis? Okay, in terms of contributing to the country, building, whatever. Okay. So that's the second question I want you to look at. You know, if you look at religious traditions, whether it is Islam, there is something called zakat. 2% of your money you give for charity or for the poor. Or if you look at Sikh religion, if you Sikh religion, a lot of them give a lot of their time for voluntary work. And if you go to the Golden Temple Amritsar, you'll see a lot of senior bureaucrats, etc., come and do a lot of ordinary jobs because they're doing something for the community. In Christianity, there's something called tithe. Okay. Whether it is Hinduism, Jainism, there's always this whole emphasis on doing something for the community, for the poor, for the marginalized. So if I take the idea of the nation as a community, how much time every week are we willing to set aside? How many hours every week? Or let's say how many hours every month are we willing to put aside to say, this is something specifically we are doing because we want to build a strong nation? And the third question, and as I said, I will start with 3 questions. Third question is, what are the 3 areas which I as an individual would like to work for the country? What are the 3 areas? In whatever capacity. I'm not saying that you should be a civil servant or some profession, the mentionality, in whatever area, whatever profession I may be, what are the three things I would contribute to, three areas I would contribute to strengthen our sense of community. So this is something which I thought I will start with. So these are three questions. But I also want to share an experience which I had in 1988. I used to also, I was an associate warden of a hostel, of a boys' hostel in Wilson College. And in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we used to have a lot of students from Africa, both African students and African students of Indian origin. And in 1988, there was this, and we also used to have space for former students to come and stay as guests for a few days. And remember, there was this student from South Africa. At that time, South Africa was experiencing apartheid. And he came and we were having conversation. And he said that you as Indians do not really understand the value of freedom, the value of being a part of a democratic process, because you've not had to fight for it. And he was a person of Indian origin. He said he had to give up his, he couldn't get into medical education. There's lots of things he was talking about because of the system of apartheid. So as people, as most of us here, have been born into an independent country, okay, how much do we really understand the value of freedom, the value of an independent nation? For my talk today, I'm going to use two important frames of reference, and I'll explain why I'm using those two frames of reference. The first frame of reference I'm using is the speech of the first Prime Minister, Nehru, Tryst with Destiny. And that speech is something which, for me, is always inspiring. Because in terms of, it says that, one of the things he says that now that we've got freedom, and now that we've got power, he says freedom and power come with a lot of responsibility. That we need to be accountable, we need to be answerable for the way we exercise power and the way we exercise freedom. Okay. And he also said that this freedom also means it's an incessant pledge or a commitment, okay, or a promise or a vada to fulfill this, striving to fulfill this pledge. And what is a pledge? He says ending of poverty, ending of ignorance, inequality of opportunity, discrimination. So he mentioned a few things. And he said that we also are here to fulfill the dream of the greatest Indian of our generation. And for him, the greatest Indian of his generation was Gandhi. And one of Gandhi's dream was to wipe the tear of every eye. Okay. Wipe the tear of every eye. And he also said that in terms of that we as a country will pursue peace, freedom, and prosperity. And not just within our country, he said, we will build a world order, a community of nations, which is not broken into isolated fragments in this particular mansion of free India. So therefore, that's a very important promise. That is the first kind of promise at the time of independence. And therefore, what is it that we have done to be able to fulfill those promises? Because he said we are going to look at the achievements in 75 years. And what do we measure our achievements in terms of this initial promise? The second frame of reference is a book called The Idea of India. The Idea of India is a book written by Sunil Khilnani. At one time, I always would ask all students of first year BA and second year BA of political science to read this book. Okay, today, of course, it's an old book. This book was published in 1999. Why am I talking about this book? Because this book marked another landmark. This book looked at India in terms of 50 years of independence, 1947 to 1997. And it looked at in terms of what is it that we've achieved, what is it that we need to still work on. And therefore, that is an interesting book. It is, as I said, it is a book which is now 21 years old. But I would still invite you to read that book as students, as members of staff, because I'm going to take some themes from that book. And I'm going to talk about some of those themes. And I think one of the reviewers of the book was a person called Ian Jack. He said this book explores the intellectual foundations of modern India, of the modern Indian state. And therefore, for me, it's important. And when I said that my first reference is a tryst with destiny, I remember in 2017, there were at least 2 or 3 titles which were published with this book when we finished 70 years. The book with another tryst with the destiny, or Tryst with Destiny 2.0. There were a lot of books written. And even before that, I remember when St. Stephen's College, Delhi celebrated, I think it's 100 years or 125 years, I forget. They also came up with a book called Another Tryst with Destiny. In terms of what did students of that college have as a vision for the country? How did they see the country? What was the vision? So for all the students and staff of different colleges who are part of this national webinar, what is our vision for the future of this country? So therefore, that is something which is important. And therefore, the book looks at actually 4 themes. And I want to look at those 4 themes. Okay. The first theme is that the book looks at India in terms of as a democratic state. And the book takes a lot of pride saying that if you look at the time period between 1947 and 1960, a lot of countries in Asia, Africa, Central and South America gained freedom in these years. But a lot of them had phases of military rule, of non-democratic rule. True, India also went through emergency between 75 and 77. But the book says that by and large, we've had democratic practice, democratic institutions. Some of us may say that maybe there are flaws in our democratic process. There are problems in the institution. But we need to take pride that, that we have had a continuous tradition of democracy. So what is our commitment to strengthening democracy? What would the meaning of democracy be for all of us? Okay, that's the first one. Second, the Indian state sought to build temples of the future. It attempted to build India on a rational scientific basis. And the first prime minister called dams and basic industries as temples of modern India, or something which would have modern structures, modern institutions, modern processes. So therefore, this whole process of industrial development and the process of sustained growth, all of that is something which is an important part of this. And also, Killarney's book also says maybe the Indira Gandhi days saw the rise of populism. A lot of policy was more for popular consumption, rather something which is based on strong economic and political foundations. That I'm sure we can discuss when you're later. The third theme is that India as a modern country began this transition from a essentially rural country to an increasingly urban country. And a lot of people are predicting that by 2050, most of India will live in cities. Or by the 100th anniversary of our independence, that most people will live in the cities. This idea of people living in cities, is it really an ideal? If you look at Gandhi, Gandhi saw cities as a curse. He saw villages, India is belonging to villages. And therefore, if you believe that cities are important for better quality of life, for a lot of progress, we also need to examine what is happening to our cities. So if you look at a city like Mumbai, I'm sure many of the participants are from Mumbai. In terms of, the estimates vary, that anywhere between 50 to 65% of Mumbai lives in slums. So what's the quality of life for people in the cities? What's the quality of life for a lot of people in the cities? And I will look at this question a little later, but also that is a thing. And the last thing Sunil Kulnani looked at is in terms of who is an Indian. And he looked at the idea of who is an Indian. He said there are three narratives. One narrative, he says, was that of Savarkar, who looked at in terms of the idea of Hindutva, or cultural nationalism, and the idea of India in terms of Gandhi, which was spiritual, but also which was inclusive. And the third narrative of what is India. So Nehru called India as a palimpsest as a confluence of cultures, intermixing of cultures, something which celebrates diversity, pluralism. So when we say that we are one nation, I have another set of questions for all of us. What is it that we understand about this diversity? So whatever your discipline is, okay. So if your discipline is geography, if your discipline is science by the natural sciences, okay. What are the different geographical environmental zones? Or as Champion and Shades talked about, different kinds of biogeographical regions. And therefore, what is it that we know about it? How many of us here are familiar with at least, let us say, 7 different languages we are familiar with in this country? So if you look at the different states, if I give this exercise to all staff and students, please write down all the states of India, the capital, the main languages spoken in the states, spoken in the states, the dominant culture, the population mix, who are some important icons, and some important history of that place. What do you know about the history of that region? If you go to Manipur, they claim they have documented history going back to about 2000 years. How many of us are familiar with the name of that book? Okay. So this is something which has always been my concern. That we always say that we understand that India has unity in diversity. How much do we really understand this diversity? How much do we respect this diversity? So in terms of whether, if you look at the force, sometimes they say in jest, for people in Delhi, everybody south of India is the Madrasi. But what do we know of the 4 distinctive cultures of the southern states? How much do we know about the language and culture of Odisha? The history, the culture. Or in terms of what are the different histories of Bengal?
Sir, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Sir, can you just adjust your camera?
Okay.
Because, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're saying about when I talk histories of Bengal, I don't know how many, I'm sure many of you have gone to Darjeeling as a tourist. So where does the word Darjeeling come from? Or if you've gone to Arunachal Pradesh, what are the different religious traditions of Arunachal Pradesh? The West Arunachal Pradesh has Vajrayana Buddhism. East Arunachal Pradesh has Theravada Buddhism. And there are so many different animistic traditions. If you go to East Arunachal Pradesh, there is Doni Polo, where the sun and moon are deities. The sun is feminine, the moon is masculine. And there's also a very interesting tradition. There's a Parshuram Kund in East Arunachal Pradesh. Normally, if you look at temples dedicated to Parshuram, we find a lot of that in Kerala. Not so much in, I was very surprised to discover that in Arunachal Pradesh. What do you know of the language of Mizoram? Or what are the three distinctive linguistic and ethnic groups in Meghalaya? Or what are the different tribal groups in Nagaland, Manipur, Arunachal? If you look at the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, what are the languages of the Jammu? What is the language of the Jammu region? What's the language of the Kashmiri region? So this is something which I think is an effort for us, if we can. So because we're talking about, we often use words like national integration. Do we even understand the kind of diversity which exists? And how do we celebrate? How do we make them feel included, respected? That is one major challenge. And one person I really feel that we don't study enough of is Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore talked about the idea of nation as having something called civilizational unity. So the spirit of our founders is something which we need to invoke. Because when I come to challenges, we'll discuss some of the challenges. So therefore, that's the first part of what I want to look at. If you say the idea of India, what is the health of our democracy? What are the achievements of our democracy? What is the achievement of our scientific and technological basis? What is the nature and quality of life of our cities? And the last is, what is the idea? Who is an Indian? How do you define an Indian? And how do you make every Indian feel included in this idea? Therefore, this is the first part of what I want to talk about. The promise which you made in 1947, an evaluation, if you do in terms of 50 years, 75 years, what is it that we've come up with? And how is it that we respond? Are we capable of having conversations, dialogues? Or does everything become reduced to a debate of somebody being right and somebody not being right? Okay, that's the first part what I want to say. Since I'm covering a lot, I will not really talk for 1 hour. I will talk in small breaks of time. So my first part ends. I will open the floor for questions. I would request the host, whoever is the host, to read if there are any questions on the chat box, or if somebody has raised a hand, to unmute them so that they can ask the question. Okay, I request the host to see if there are any questions in the chat box on the first part of what I've spoken. Some of the questions I've asked, some of the questions I've raised, and some of the themes I've talked about. If any of you have any questions, please ask. And then I'll go to the second part of achievements and challenges. Yeah. So 5 or 10 minutes for questions. If there are any questions, we'll start with that.
Hello, Shraddha. Are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Sir, there is one question participants that what are the challenges for youth in modern India?
Okay, see, I am going to deal with challenges in some time. So that is something which I have an entire section on. So that I will explain. But I would like the question. I mean, I'll first answer questions on what I've already covered, because there's an entire section on challenges that is for youth and for everybody else. So therefore, the first challenge, as I said, for youth in India is how much do you really know about the country? If all the young people in the country can really sit down now or after the session, draw a map of India, draw all the states, identify important cities, cultures, problems, challenges. Do we first understand our country? What is the kind of development which is taking place in different states? What are the challenges which people in different states face? That's a question, because see, if you look at a state like Mizoram, Mizoram has possibly one of the highest literacy rates in the country. It also has possibly the highest number of graduates in the country. But it also has very little economic growth because it's remote, it's cut off from the rest of the country. So how does one really respond to the economic and development needs of a state like Mizoram or Tripura? So when I say the first challenge is my concern as a teacher for so many years, maybe I'm wrong, that a lot of us, a lot of young people do not know enough of the country. So I said, do this. So if the youth want a challenge, let them do this. No, even in terms of identify all the states and union territories, the different people belong to a different of the union territory. So if you take the Daman, Diu, Lakshadweep, they all come under one administration. What are the different kinds of people who live in this? Similarly, if you look at the union territory of Puducherry, it includes Chandranagore, Karaikal. They're not contiguous. So understanding of our rich cultural, economic heritage, okay, people heritage, I think that's the first challenge. We need to know our country better. And the challenge for the youth is, what is it that we're doing on an everyday basis? That's the first. See, the three questions I asked in the beginning is a question of challenge for everybody. It's a question I need to ask. I need to answer also. I'll be 60 this year. In these 60 years, can others look at my life and say, this person has helped make India a little better in terms of either through education or, as Dr. Ved Prakash talked about, my interest in nature. So the different activities in terms of eco-restoration or whatever. Have I made a difference? And I mean, I should not be asked. Others should be able to see that. Because I can always boast, but the idea is in what is the kind of difference we're making? Because we all tend to blame, of course, we lead the people who we elect and people who represent us are also responsible for doing it. But what is our responsibility? What is our contribution? Somebody like Ramanohar Lohia, he talked about an unending revolution in the fight against injustice. He also talked about Sapta Kranti, ending discrimination. He was one of the only leaders I know in India who said that India, we must end this whole color discrimination. Okay. He talked about gender, he talked about economic, he talked about caste, but he was the only one who mentioned that India has a serious problem of people in terms of discriminating against on the basis of their skin color. So if you're looking at challenges, I would suggest you read up Ramanohar Lohia. Look at his idea of Sapta Kranti. Because he invited youth. Forum youth were an important part of this transformation, where all of us are responsible. I mean, I may feel young at heart, but I'm not really a part of the youth. So all of you are. So and therefore, I hope you're able to do that. I hope that answers your question. Some other part of the question I will definitely answer as we go on. Yeah. Any other question, please?
Yes. One more question, sir.
Yeah.
Can't we make defense services compulsory like Israel?
There in many countries they have conscription. If you go to countries like Israel, if you can go to countries like Switzerland, that everybody has to play must have compulsory military training. One, there are 2 or 3 issues. One, of course, it's the kind of cost which is involved. Okay, and the kind of energy the army and allied forces have to use to train, more than 100 crore people, and therefore the cost. And second, the question, of course, as if you're a liberal democracy, is can we make anything compulsory? And the third thing is, discipline, loyalty. Should it be the prerogative of the army or defense services? Can discipline and contribution and loyalty, whatever the other values you look at, can't it be also a contribution, a feature of every Indian, okay, of every college, every school? But it also means that, okay, we also must give people the choice. So that is something which I believe. Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah. One last question, sir. How would you look at the journey of India independence till now?
The journey of India has been, what should I say? It's been a mixed journey. Why do I say it's a mixed journey? When we started off in 1947, we had no really precedent, we had no role model, we had no examples of how to go about it. And therefore, we chose a certain model of development. And that model of development, I remember reading Nehru in 1963 said, we need to review what we're doing. We need to review our socialist pattern. So maybe there's not been enough review of what we have done after 1964. So it's mixed. We have had this. There are serious limitations. So a lot of the limitations will look in our challenges. And there are dangers, there are threats. That's also something we need to look at. So if you have to look at the journey, we need to look at, the first thing is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the preamble of the Constitution. Because the preamble of the Constitution talks about we the people of India, give unto us to ourselves, okay, a sovereign democratic republic, okay, to secure justice, liberty, and equality. So one of the ways in which we can evaluate our journey is to look at in terms of what is justice meant for, and what does justice mean for different categories of our people. What does liberty mean for different categories of people? What does equality mean for different categories of people? So as a teacher, I don't want to give you an answer in terms of, this is what the journey, as I said, is mixed. It can be seen as different from different perspectives. But you need to look at all these factors. Hello? Is there another question?
No, sir, you can continue.
Yeah. So as I said, the journey, I would have one perspective. Somebody else would have another perspective. All of, I mean, sometimes if you had, if you had offline, I would have liked to know the perspective of younger people. One of the questions I would like to ask all young people, because I am of the older generation, do you think our generation has done justice as citizens of the country? Or do you think our generation has failed? Okay. Please think about this. You may not answer now. But that's another way to look at the journey. So if I look at the journey from the point of view of a bureaucrat, I may feel satisfied that I was able to do what I did. Or a politician, or a scientist, or as a teacher. But those of you who are between 18 and 25, 18 and 30, how do you evaluate India's journey? Because a significant part of the journey, you've not really had a role. My generation has had a role. So how do you look at us? That's a good, that's a question I leave to you. My apologies. See, sometimes I may not seem to be answering a question straight, because I'm not sure whether my answer is the right answer. My answer comes from my own journey, which is limited, which may have its own set of biases, prejudices. So I don't want it to be your frame of reference. I can only point out things which I believe all of us should be looking at. Okay, before I go to the, sorry, are there any other questions?
Yes, sir. Just now I got one question.
Yeah.
How would you differentiate between nationalism and patriotism?
Okay. First of all, if you look at the word nation, the word nation in Punjabi and in Urdu is Qaum. Qaum means community. Okay? And if you look at the word nation, I'm sure some of your political science students will remember what Walter Anderson said as nation as imagined community. Okay? So what is my definition of nation? That's what something I want to ask. Is my definition of nation inclusive? Does it include all communities, all sections of people? Even people are so different from me. And a lot of us, when we meet somebody from either Mizoram or Nagaland or Meghalaya or Arunachal, we don't know whether they're Indian, because their features seem to be different from the rest of us from peninsular India. So if I want to look at the idea of nation, so how would somebody from Kashmir look at the idea of nation? How would a person from Ladakh look at the idea of nation? So first is define nation for yourself. Second, when you say patriotism or nationalism, if you say love for your country, what is the definition of love? Is definition of patriotism, of love, just obedience? Or would love mean critical acceptance? I don't know if any of you in this class are familiar with somebody called Anthony de Mello. He's one of my favorite writers. In one of his books, he was a Catholic priest. In one of his books, he writes, he says, I dedicate this book to the Catholic Church. Though I am painfully aware of its narrowness, its bigotry, and the pain it has inflicted on many people, because it is my spiritual home. So if I say India or India and Indians are part of my family, I must also be willing to have, I mean, I don't know how many of you here are psychology students. If you're psychology students, I don't know if you're familiar with somebody called Eric Fromm. So Eric Fromm definition of love has 4 dimensions: respect, understanding, concern, care. So when you say you love your country, you have respect for all Indians, you understand all Indians, you have concern for all Indians, and you care for and contribute towards the well-being of all Indians. So if patriotism is love for your country, I would use the definition of love. And I also believe my country is strong enough to be able to withstand criticism about its record, about its development track record. I'm sure we can be willing to discuss that as well. So for me, patriotism and nationalism does not really mean uncritical acceptance or obedience. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, please?
No, sir, you can continue.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how many in this group, I don't know how many people are in this group, have read Gandhi's book, Hind Swaraj. Hind Swaraj is possibly Gandhi's most important work on his vision of political philosophy. And therefore, for his vision of political philosophy is a mixture of the political, the ethical, the spiritual. And therefore, he talks about how when he says that the Indian nation, the Indian Praja, will need to have what he calls an upgraded idea of Dharma. So traditionally, if you look at the idea of Dharma as duty, responsibility of sticking to ethical principles, his idea of upgraded Dharma includes rule of law, liberty, pluralism, accountability. So if you are talking about the idea of patriotism, or if you say nationalism, or if you want to use Gandhi's word and say what is a Rashtriya Dharma? So Rashtriya Dharma is something we need to understand in terms of what Gandhi had in mind. For him, definitely it was pluralism, okay, multiple perspectives, ideas, and of course liberty, of course accountability, and of course the rule of law. What's the rule of law? One law for the ruled and for the rulers. One law for the rulers and the ruled. And if you say, okay, somebody asks me, what's the challenge for youth? One of the biggest challenges for youth, from my experiences, most of us as Indians do not have respect for the rule of law. Start with simple things like traffic rules. If you follow traffic rules, there'll be less noise pollution, less air pollution, smoother traffic, no congestion. If everybody followed the rule of law, there'll be much less road accidents. You know, there's a very interesting book I want young people read. The book is called Truck Day India. There's this author who travels across India by taking lifts on trucks. And one of the things he says that one of the reasons for the bad state of our highways is that majority of our goods trucks are overloaded, 3 to 15 times. It's much more weight than the road can bear, and much more weight than the vehicle can bear. So therefore, there are lots of accidents. We are one of the highest level of road accidents in the world. So respect for the rule of law is fundamental. And we all, in so many cities, I don't know if it's true in other cities. I remember I was with students in Delhi, and somebody just cut the vehicle in front of a bus, and the police guy stopped him. And he said, because we could have had a bad accident because the signal started, and this guy, that guy was, he said, "Janta hu main, kaun hu main?" So this is the problem. A lot of us think because we are in positions of privilege, power, the law doesn't apply to us. I'm sure as teachers, we need to ask questions. Do we as teachers, are we as teachers role models for our students as people who follow the rule of law? The young people have sufficient role models from our generation. I think if you honestly ask the question and we can work towards it, a lot of the challenges we'll be able to. Somebody asked about what is the what can the youth do? My question is, what can all of us do as citizens? Yeah. So let us look at. Just give me a minute. I'm almost. I need to be able to finish fast. So let us look at achievements. If you look at one of the biggest achievements, maybe of the first 2 decades of the 1950s and 60s, is we built strong democratic institutions. When I say strong, I'm not saying perfect. They're fairly strong to be able to face all kinds of challenges, to have transfer of power, lots of things. And our democratic institution was strong enough to withstand the authoritarian phase of emergency. So therefore, that is something which is important, that the foundations of a lot of our political institutions are fairly strong. One may contest that. One may say, yes, there are a lot of problems. Yes, there are. We'll identify, we'll deal with that in some time. Second is, if you look at in terms of industrial and whatever capability, they say by 1990, India had built the capacity to build anything from a pin to a plane. So whether it is the achievement of ISRO, achievement of ONGC in terms of oil exploration, or achievement of a lot of our educational institutions. If you look at some of the world's major companies, many of them have people who have passed out from our IITs and IIMs, maybe other institutions. So we have a fairly good, what we call educational institution. We may complain about the quality of education. Yes, that will come. But the products of our educational system have really added value to the world of science, to the world of so many things. And also in terms of this balancing of economic growth with some amount of distribution. And if you look at, between 2008 and 2011-12, most parts of the world went through recession. One of the reasons why India didn't go into recession because of mechanisms like
Sudhakar sir.
Yeah,
Sudhakar sir.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Can you just adjust your camera angle?
That's
because
problem. Yeah, I know.
yeah, because now it's okay, sir. Now this way it's okay. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So as a request, please.
Yeah, I know.
Maintain
Sorry,
this.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, no issue. Thank you, sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah. No. Thanks for pointing out. So if you look at the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, it made sure that there was effective demand across rural India. So a lot of our companies, etc., could sell their products. Demand didn't falter. So even if you look at the recent migrant crisis, when millions of migrants left because the cities didn't care enough for them, it was NREGA which absorbed a lot of them and provided them with jobs. And therefore, there are mechanisms which have definitely attempted to balance economic growth with some amount of safety net. Or, of course, there is a lot of problems with the implementation of this particular act. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this 2006 Forest Dwellers' Rights Act. It's an attempt to provide justice to millions of forest dwellers, tribal communities. Then, of course, things like the Food Security Act. So a lot of these are an attempt to ensure that we are able to kind of balance this. And of course, a lot of people are worried that in terms of increasingly, there is not a lot of tolerance for dissent. Okay? But we still have lots of pockets of vibrant dissent. A lot of young people. I mean, I'm, sometimes when I look, I am so much more positive and optimistic about the younger generation than my generation. A lot of younger people are thinking, questioning. I'm really proud of the kind of critical thinking a lot of young people have, and I hope that that always continues. That Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Similarly, the unexamined political life is not worth living. So if all of us are citizens, it's our responsibility to do this. So we still have lots of pockets of dissent, positive contribution to what should be done. So as we come to the last part of what we need to look at, because we're running out of time, I will look at some of the challenges. One, as I started at the beginning, in terms of there's a lot of ignorance about different communities. And how much do we find in common with people of different faiths? Okay. Like I mentioned Tagore. Tagore talked about civilizational unity. What is the common ground we can have with people of different faiths, different ethnic backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds? But Tagore felt that all of us should make the attempt to learn other languages. So maybe if each one can learn languages from a completely different region. And I'm sure a lot of young people have a flair for language, which I don't have. Okay. The other challenge is in terms of, if you look at India's ranking in the Human Development Report, okay, or what is called the Quality of Life Index. Okay. India's ranking is in the last quarter. And there is a lot we can do there. So when you're talking about in terms of, and now a lot of people are looking at in terms of the fact that our health infrastructure is something which has been exposed. And especially if you look at rural areas, in so many places, there is this whole inadequacy. So what is it that we need to correct that? One of my friends, Dr. Nachiket Moore, who's doing a lot of work in public health, he's doing a study to understand why Indian voters are not holding politicians accountable for the poor quality of health services. You must, I don't know if any of you have gone, if those of you are Maharashtrian, if you've traveled in Gadchiroli district, if you leave Gadchiroli town, and you go to smaller taluka, to go to the different talukas and villages, you'll find there's a huge problem with primary health centers. And therefore people like Abhay and Rani Bang, Prakash Amte, these are people who are possibly providing a lot of health services. The state in many parts of India, many parts of Maharashtra, is inadequate. I remember in 2009 was the first time when I took students to Kashmir. And in the night, one of the students had a problem, severe abdominal pain. So we rushed her to a government hospital because that was open 24 hours. It was so crowded, basic equipment we couldn't find. And we also had a meeting with the chief minister at that time. After that, so the student asked, why is the healthcare thing so bad? So he said, unfortunately, that at the district level, a lot of our health infrastructure is in poor shape. So everybody has to come to the capital for them to get treatment. And therefore, there's a lot of pressure on hospitals. Some of us complain about public hospital. Please spend time at KEM or Sion. Look at the kind of load the doctors and nurses have. So that's something important in terms of important. So when you look at the quality of life, so how do we create public opinion for governments to invest in primary healthcare? Coming to education, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ramchandra Guha. So Ramchandra Guha, in his critique of Nehru, he says when Nehru paid a lot of attention to setting up IITs and lots of such institutions, he did not really pay enough attention to ensuring that primary education was put on a strong foundation. Do not look at leaders as being responsible for everything. All leaders have their pluses and minuses, they're humans. So there will be things which go wrong. So, but this is something important. What is the kind of, quality of education, primary education, municipal education, quality of Jilla Parishad schools? What can we do to strengthen that? What can we do to build that? The other thing, of course, is uneven development. Okay. So if you look at Maharashtra, out of the 35 or 36 districts, nearly 17 come under less developed districts. Among the 17, some of the biggest problem of low development is in Vidarbha. Also, in terms of how much are we familiar with what we understand as agricultural distress. Still, a large number of people live in agriculture. So, how much we understand the problem of agriculture? How many of you have read different dimensions of the farmers' agitation? It's 6 months. And if you look at Maharashtra, if you look at Vidarbha, Vidarbha is called, Western Vidarbha is called the suicide capital of India. Extremely large number of farmer suicides. Does that prick our conscience? Of course, it's very interesting that in Vidarbha there are NGOs along with state government also trying to provide a lot of mental health support. Because when there is so much of economic and other distress, okay, stress levels are massive. So that's another challenge in terms of, if you look at different states, if you look at MP, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, UP, a large number of states. So how do we really look at this issue of ensuring? The other, of course, is in terms of the health of our institutions. One of the biggest problems, in my opinion, is the judiciary. So if you look at the backlog of cases, if you look at the backlog of cases with all the high courts, lower courts, and the Supreme Court, it's more than 4 crore. There are cases which have, pulled on for more than 30 years, 25 years. India also has one of the largest under trials. So a lot of these are questions in terms of this. And also in terms of judiciary. is the judiciary in India really standing up for individual rights? Because judiciary is supposed to be the guardian of rights. So therefore, in that sense, large number of individuals, activists, teachers, students who are in jail, are we aware of those issues? See, my problem is not that all of us have to agree with what an activist say. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lord Acton. Lord Acton said, I may disagree with you very strongly, but I'll fight till my last breath to ensure that you have the right to express what you think is right according to you. So pluralism, that's something which is taking a lot of hit. How do we respect other opinions, contrarian opinions, criticism? You know, our spaces, you know, in terms of colleges, etc., are we also places which are comfortable with dissent, criticism, or do we get very defensive? I think we need a lot of introspection. You know, it's not so much about what Kennedy said, ask not what the country can do for you. We need to start with what is it that we can do for the country. You know, many of you are familiar with Anna Hazare. You know, when he got this discharge from the army, he said at the railway station, when he got down at Pune railway station, he picked up a book of Vivekananda. And he said in that book, Vivekananda said that if you want to change the world, change yourself. When you change yourself, your family may see the change and may change. When your family changes, the community may change. So it's this concentric process. So whatever standards I'm subjecting my leaders and others to, am I also subjecting myself to those same standards? So challenges are the quality of life index. Challenges is the idea of pluralism, the idea of palimpsest. These, I think, are very, very precious. Okay. I've gone beyond my time of 1 hour because we started at 3. So if there are any questions, I think I should give time for questions. You know, this is such a topic, there's so much to talk about. And when we talk about roadmap, just give me 2 minutes. See, what is a roadmap? Roadmap is for us to identify. That's why my questions in the beginning are very important. What are the 3 areas I as an individual, we as a college, think we should focus on as far as nation building is concerned? And can we do that? You know, and also when you're doing things like nation building, I also want us to be in terms of, you know, self-critical of the kind of choices you make. You know, I was talking to this former student of mine, Vivek Kulkarni. He's an ornithology expert, an expert on mangroves. He's also on a lot of government boards. So we were discussing this idea of tree planting. And he says that, you know, sometimes the government has this target of 1 crore, 3 crores, 15 crores. So what the forest department does is it plants a species called Gliricidia. So it's an exotic species. Now this is not really good for the soil. It doesn't, it's not really, most herbivores can't feed on it. Because herbivores can't eat it, it is planted everywhere. But if I have to plant indigenous native species, fruit species, I have to do a lot of taking care. Those of you in Mumbai, please visit villages like Hivre Bazaar, Ralegaon Siddhi. So when they're doing this tree planting, one of the rules of the village was nobody would let their cattle to graze. If they let the cattle out, they'll put a muzzle so that the cattle didn't chew up the saplings. So it's a lot of community work which is important for any kind of transformation. So roadmap, health, education, justice, let the college, let groups of people choose. Some of you will graduate now. all of your citizens. So maybe figure out what is it that your friends and you will want to work for. Because all of us must have a say in the way this country is. And I'm sure your critical opinion matters a lot. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, I'll take up the questions.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. There are few questions from participants.
Yeah.
I want to ask few of them.
Sure.
First question is, yes, what makes the nation more vibrant and inclusive? Diversity or homogeneity?
See, homogeneity is something we can't choose. See, as a country, by nature, we are diverse. So if you look at the languages of the South, the people of the South, they are culturally very distinct from people of the North. Though many South Indian languages have a lot of Sanskrit and others, but over a period of cultural mixing. So diversity is something which is a reality. And if we don't accept that diversity, we are going to alienate people. We're going to make them feel like second-class citizens. If you look at respect for, the people of, as I said, for me, I have a lot of strong feeling for students of and people from the 7 states of the Northeast. I have had time to travel extensively with students on my own. A lot of them feel that they're not respected. So when I say, is diversity is a fact. And diversity must be respected. And that's why I quoted Tagore. Is there anything common which can bind us in spite of all the differences and diversity? That's what's important. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
There is next question. Do you think diversity was celebrated more during pre-independence than now?
See, I don't know whether pre-independence, I don't know whether we really celebrated India. Because a lot of us were people living in princely states and they didn't really have exposure to the rest of the country. And of course, a lot of people from this part of the country had no exposure to, as I said, somebody from Tripura or somebody from Arunachal Pradesh. So a lot of the integration started post-independence. Maybe within communities which are familiar, was there more comfort with diversity? Maybe. But how do you accommodate the diverse? How do you make them feel that they're respected? Those are issues which we can discuss and we can have a debate about. So that when you say that a lot of the places like, if you look at a place like Tawang, West Arunachal Pradesh, I'm sure most people even now don't know where Tawang is. If I ask you to point out where it is on the map. Or if I ask you to point out where is Balukpong. Because Balukpong is a border between Arunachal and Assam, where in 1962 the Chinese army had come down. So we would have no idea, because the 6th Dalai Lama was from Tawang. And that's why China claims Arunachal as South Tibet. So do we know enough about that? If you look, I asked about Darjeeling. Darjeeling comes from the word called Dorje, which is the Tibetan word for Vajra. So, the kind of Tibetan influence and Tibetan Nepali cultural influence in Darjeeling. So that diversity is something, a lot of it came with independence. Because there were states like Nagaland, Manipur, many of them wanted to be independent even at that time. Yeah. Okay. Any other question?
Thank you, sir. Next question is, what do we do for achieving sustainable development goals to improve our human development index?
Yeah, I'm so happy you asked this question, because that was a very important part of my talk. I just chopped it because there was no time. This question is very important because I wanted to start with Gandhi, where he said, the earth is enough for man's need, not for man's greed. And therefore, there is this whole issue of sustainable development, which can be a part of our political and environmental agenda. And if you want to talk about sustainable development, you need to travel. You need to look at the degradation of our forests. You need to look at what global warming is doing to snowfall, okay, in places like Ladakh, Spiti Valley. Or, I remember about 10 years ago, 8-9 years ago, in Lahore Valley, there is a glacial lake called Satdara. In summer, it is completely dry because there's been very less snowfall. So there are a lot of challenges. So when you say sustainable development is a very big word. So what do we do? One is at a college level. How are we managing are we reducing waste? Are we reducing energy consumption? Are we collecting all our plastic and paper waste and using NGOs or recycling to have recycled? So there are a lot of steps which institutions and individuals can take up. Okay. So therefore, sustainable development, sustainable growth is really very important. But sustainable growth cannot be discussed unless we look at the idea of lifestyle. If my lifestyle is very wasteful, then it's hypocritical for me to talk about sustainable development. So lifestyle, do I walk enough for things to get? Do I instead of taking vehicles or taxis or whatever? Do I make sure that I don't avoid unnecessary use of paper, okay, including tissue? So there are lots of things I can look at. So institutional, because it's easy to talk about it, how to implement it. So when you say sustainable development goals are very, very important. So how do you involve communities? Recently, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the passing away of Sundarlal Bahuguna. Okay. There is a person called Chandi Prasad Bhatt who was actually responsible for starting the Chipko movement. Sundarlal Bahuguna popularized it. So he in Uttarakhand from the 70s has been practicing something called ecologically sustainable development, where you manage forests in a way which the needs of local people are maintained, taken care of. Plus, they have nurseries to plant, to reclaim degradés. There are lots of things which can be done. So we need to figure out solutions according to the context in which we are placed: urban, rural, mountain. So there can be different kinds of contexts. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Thank
Any
you,
other
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, one last question, sir.
Yeah.
Do you think information boom is very bad to our diversity or freedom in the sense of all kinds of news and information floats around?
See, when you talk about information, when you talk about information, there's information, there is knowledge, there's wisdom. There is a lot of information. As we as people who claim to be educated, we have the wisdom. So somebody was explaining to me about the difference between information. I think Vivek Kulkarni was talking to me yesterday about information, knowledge, and wisdom. See, everybody knows that tulsi is useful to cure cough. Knowledge is what is the process, what are the substances which is in it for us to be able to use it. And knowledge is knowing for which kind of cough tulsi is useful and which kind of cough is not useful. So similarly, when you talk about information flows, yes, we need to be discerning. We need to be able to check sources, look at multiple sources. Yeah, the problem with freedom is, of course, there's a lot of hate, which I don't know how to really deal with without, because sometimes in the name of stopping hate, we can also stop genuine expression, genuine dissent. Okay, so therefore, that is one problem. But information will be there. We will need to increase our wisdom, our ability to discern, the ability to examine, to look for evidence, to to see what is really relevant. Because if one has that faculty of wisdom, it helps. Similarly, if you look at sciences, social science or natural sciences, what is the essential quality of a natural scientist or social scientist? Curiosity, the need to look for evidence, the need to look for right connections. If I can apply my mind to everything, this scientific temper. That's why I'm very fascinated with Tagore. Tagore felt there was a need for scientific temper. He used to have a lot of issues with Gandhi because Gandhi was giving all kinds of superstitious reasons for calamities. And Tagore was very critical, though he was the one who gave the title Mahatma to Gandhi. But he was very critical of that. That's the kind of relationship I think all of us can have. We can be very close to different people. We can respect some views, but we can also be critical of views which don't really match the principles of discerning understanding. Discernment is the ability to figure out what is right, what is not right. Yeah. Are there any other questions, please?
No, sir, that's it. Thank you so much, sir, for answering our questions so patiently. Now I would like to request Rita ma'am for further proceeding.
Thank you so much, Sudhakar sir. Thank you for your wonderful speech. Now I request Ved Prakash sir to continue with the proceedings. Ved Prakash sir.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद मैडम। सर बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण वक्तव्य रहा आपका, और वक्तव्य में आपने ढेर सारी बातें बताई, और सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि राजनीति शास्त्र के आप आधिकारिक विद्वान हैं। लगभग 38 सालों से आप हिंदी मतलब इतिहास विभाग के विभागाध्यक्ष रहे हैं, और वो सारी पीढ़ियों को, लगभग 4 दशक की पीढ़ियों को आपने जो है अपने ज्ञान से नवाजा है, उनको सम्मानित किया है, और ये पीढ़ियां आगे बढ़ी हैं। और आज जब आप कह रहे थे तो मैं लगातार महसूस कर रहा था उन सारी चीजों के कि 1983 से जो अब तक का माहौल आपने जो है बताया इतिहास में, सचमुच नई पीढ़ी को ये जानने की बहुत जरूरत है। आपने अपने वक्तव्य की शुरुआत में ही जो है नेहरू जी के उस वक्तव्य से किया जो है, जहां पर आपने सारी बातों को जो है शेयर किया, लेकिन नई पीढ़ी क्या उन चीजों को ग्रिप कर रही है, क्या उसे एक्सेप्ट कर रही है? हिंद स्वराज्य जैसी महत्वपूर्ण कृति जो है महात्मा गांधी ने लिखी, और उसके अंदर उन्होंने जो बातें बताई, सत्याग्रह की बात बताई, आत्मबल सबसे बड़ी चीज उन्होंने बताया, और करुणा की बात कही, ये सारी चीजें अब पीढ़ी जो है छोड़ती जा रही है। और इन चीजों पर मुझे लगता है आपने जो ध्यान लोगों का लाया है इस वक्तव्य के माध्यम से, आपके वक्तव्य में एक बहुत बड़ी अच्छी बात मुझे जो लगी कि आपने सभी धर्मों की बातें बताई, जिसमें देशभक्ति के वह बीज कहाँ रह गए उन पर आपने चर्चा की। और एक बड़ी विडंबना से जो आपने हमको रूबरू कराया, ये सभी जानते हैं, महसूस भी करते हैं कि ये बड़ी विडंबना है कि आज टीवी पर जो परिचर्चाएं होती हैं, वह मतलब उनमें मुद्दे की बात नहीं होती है, सिर्फ और सिर्फ जो है एक जिसे कह सकते हैं कि ड्रामा टाइप का जो है क्रिएट किया जाता है। लेकिन ऐसी चीज हो जिससे कुछ निष्कर्ष निकल के आए, और वह निष्कर्ष आने वाली पीढ़ी या फिर अभी की जो पीढ़ी है उसका दिशा निर्देशन कर सके, जिसका सबसे बड़ा उद्देश्य प्रधानमंत्री जी ने ये जो उत्सव मनाने की बात कही थी, उन्होंने कहा कि युवा पीढ़ी को स्वाधीन आंदोलन का स्मरण कराना है, उनको चुनौतियों से जूझने के लिए नई प्रेरणा देना है, उनको उनके अंदर नई ऊर्जा लानी है। ये सारी बातें जो है इस अमृत महोत्सव में जो होनी थी, और आपके इस वक्तव्य, मुझे लगता है कि आपका ये वक्तव्य सचमुच में वह जो एक बड़ा उत्सव है उसकी एक आधारशिला बनेगी। एक वह पुस्तक जो तैयार होगी उसका एक अध्याय हो सकता है सर। और सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि आपने विडंबना जो जाहिर की कि हमारा जो है ये ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट इंडेक्स में जो है भारतीयों का जो इंडेक्स है वो कम होता जा रहा है, ये भी घोर विडंबना का विषय है। और इन सब चीजों को एकत्र करके नई पीढ़ी को नए सिरे से सोचने की आवश्यकता है। और जैसा कि सर आपके नाम में ही है सुधाकर, तो सचमुच आज आपके वक्तव्य से सुधा का रस ही आ रहा था, और लगातार हम सब लोग जो है आनंद की अनुभूति कर रहे थे। और आपने इतना बेहतरीन वक्तव्य दिया है, सचमुच जो है नई पीढ़ी को एक अपनी भूमिका के बारे में नए सिरे से सोचने की जरूरत है। लोग अधिकारों की चर्चा तो खूब करते हैं, लेकिन अपने कर्तव्य भूल जा रहे हैं, और कर्तव्यों को जो है स्मरण करने से आपके अधिकार अपने आप सचेत होते जाते हैं, आपके पास आते जाते हैं। तो सचमुच सर, आपने बहुत ही बेहतरीन वक्तव्य दिया और हम सब अभिभूत हैं। और मैं ये मानता हूं कि विल्सन कॉलेज के वे विद्यार्थी जो आपके अध्यक्षशिप में जो है इतिहास मेरा भी प्रिय विषय रहा है सर, और इतिहास के अध्यक्ष होने के नाते आपने जो 4 दशकों से पीढ़ियों को ज्ञान दिया है वह बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। आज आपने जो अपना वक्तव्य दिया वो भी बहुत मायने रखता है हमारे लिए। सर, 4 पंक्तियों से मैं अपनी बात को समाप्त करूंगा, और आपने जो इतना बढ़िया वक्तव्य दिया उसके लिए आपको साधुवाद भी दूंगा कि सांसों पर विश्वास कर लिया, सांसों पर विश्वास कर लिया, हर पग को इतिहास कर लिया, जीवन जीना सीखा उसने जिसने मरने का अभ्यास कर लिया। सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आज हमारे इस राष्ट्रीय वेबिनार में आप आए और आपने अपनी बात रखी। हम सब आपके वक्तव्य से अभिभूत हुए। यकीनन ऐसे मौके आप हमें देते रहेंगे और हम समय समय पर आपका सदुपयोग करते रहेंगे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं ऋतु मैडम से कहूंगा कृपया कार्यक्रम को आगे की तरफ ले जाएं।
धन्यवाद। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Dr. Ved Prakash. Now we are moving ahead for the concluding part of today's national level webinar. Now I request Dr. Rekha Randev ma'am, the Vice Principal of Home Science, to give the vote of thanks. Rekha ma'am, please.
Yes, thank you, Ritu. Good evening to one and all present here, especially our resource person for the day, Mr. Sudhakar Solamraj sir, our director ma'am, Dr. Kumdali, principal Dr. Asha Menon, my dear colleagues, and our valuable and enthusiastic participants. I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks on the occasion of the first program under the umbrella of Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which would commence from 75 weeks before 15th August 2022 and continue up to 15/8/2023. The knowledge shared by our eminent speaker has enhanced our pool of knowledge. He has taken us through a journey of 75 years of independence, what achievements we had in the past, and challenges, and directed us to a clear roadmap towards our future. Thank you, sir, for making us aware of the capabilities inside of us so that we could build a still better future. Now, this future funnel would be based on awareness, interest, skills, strength, opportunities, and then success. And which you rightly said would come from respect, understanding, love, and care. So on behalf of our institution, I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to Sudhakar sir. I would also like to mention my sincere appreciation to our honorable trustees for being there for us as strong pillars of strength in all our endeavors. I express my heartfelt gratitude to our director, ma'am, Dr. S. Kumudavali, for guiding us constantly and along the way helping us to take up new challenges. Thank you, ma'am. I extend my deep sense of appreciation to our dynamic principal, Dr. Asha Menon, who is a perfectionist in almost all areas. I appreciate and thank especially the Criteria 7 team of IQAC and the NSS team of our college for their untiring efforts to make the program a success. I take this opportunity to thank the vice principals and coordinators of all faculties for their support in every event. My thanks are due to the technical team as well for making all the required arrangements in the execution of today's event. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to my colleague, Dr. Ritu Bhatia, Dr. Ved Prakash, and Ms. Shraddha for anchoring and handling the question answer session so smoothly. Last but not the least, I thank all our dear participants and viewers for their valuable presence and also active involvement during the question answer session. I would just like to end here by saying भारत के अमृत महोत्सव ने अभी अभी ली अंगड़ाई। इसे तो हम आजादी की बधाई ही कह सकते हैं। 75 वर्ष बीत गए आजादी के। यह यात्रा हम सबको याद दिलाती है कि हमें भारत को आत्मनिर्भर भारत बनाना है बाय द ईयर 2022। थैंक यू। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, Dr. Rekha Randhave ma'am. And so we conclude today's national level webinar with the hope and with the pride of being an Indian. So Jai Hind, all the best to all of you. Stay safe, stay healthy,